Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
So, welcome to another episode of Organizational Transformation Kung Fu, or OT Kung Fu, as we affectionately call it. Jen and I came up with the idea for this podcast, a few years back, over a glass of wine or two, when we were when we were dealing with a number of leadership challenges. And so we named it Organizational Kung Fu because we know that transformation takes time, and it takes energy, and it takes the discipline for anything to sort of to happen and for change to happen. And so our podcasts are all about helping organizations get better, how to make change stick and take root within organizations. And we're real thrilled to be here to do another episode. So I'm here today with my colleague, Jen Long from Own Up in Denver, Colorado.
Hey, Sandi. Here I am. And it's still hot Denver.
Yes. And I'm Sandi Verrecchia from Satori Consulting in Toronto. And we are thrilled to have another expert on our podcast today. And I'm going to hand it over to Jen to give a little intro.
We love having the experts because this is how we learn, because as executive coaches and consultants and trainers, we got to go to the experts when we need to get smart. And so today we have the lovely Sean Grace with us, who is the author of the newly released book called The Art of the Question, a guide for seekers, dreamers, problem solvers, and leaders. So yay, you getting all the hashtags in on your subtitle.
Welcome, Sean.
Right? No, it's a great title. As an introduction, Sean is a communication consultant. In addition to being an author, he's also a coach and a speaker with over 25 years of experience developing training and sales, marketing, leadership talent across a bunch of diverse industries. His unique brand of business consulting is forged from his long career in media advertising and the creative arts. So kindred spirit here in the whole arts thing. And Sean studied music performance at Juilliard, the Juilliard School, and SUNY. Is it SUNY or is it just SUNY?
Yeah, SUNY. That's what I always called it. Yeah. State University of New York.
State University of New York purchase and finance at Wharton. He's an award-winning musician and a multi-instrumentalist. He borrows techniques from jazz improvisation to help foster creative collaboration and cooperation within and across teams. Welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
And so I don't know, this whole performance thing is a whole skill set that I find is so super handy when working with businesses. So we can talk about that a little bit as well. But what we really want to talk about is this effort that you've done with your book. And so The Art of the Question, tell us, just as a launching point, why now? What made you write it now?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an idea that I've had in my mind for many years, and it really came out of, at least the fruition really came out of a series of workshops that I had designed and facilitated for a number of corporate clients over the years, and one of them being the art of the question as it relates to leadership, coaching, managing, and communication. But as I started doing more and more of that workshop, it started to apply to critical thinking, creative thinking, teamwork, and all of the things that really can fall under communication and creative problem solving. So I really decided to kind of sit down and put all this together about a year ago, although it was the result of several years of accumulative notes and research that I had put together for the workshops, and with the intention of maybe one day putting it all into a book. So it really came out of that fact that I felt like I had enough data and enough information to complete a book, and I felt I had enough case studies to work from based on all of the workshops that I had produced and conducted. So after several hundred participants working through the workshops over a couple of years, I felt I had a pretty good sense of what was working, what wasn't, and what to refine, and what to get rid of, what to amplify, etc. So from that, I then said, okay, I think I'm ready for this. And I had a little bit of time off, about 6 weeks late last summer that I carved out, and I, with the with the false hope of knocking this thing out in just a couple of months. But of course, it takes a lot longer than that to put together a 300-page book, at least anything that has of any substance and meaning. So that really is why now and where it came out of.
I have to say, it's really well designed, and so it flowed really quite nicely. So the art of the question, I'm just curious, because we're going to be questioning you today, just curious about the art of the question. Is it more important today than it was, let's say, pre-COVID, or, let's leave it at that, pre-COVID?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure if I have a definitive answer if the skill set is more important now than it used to be. But what I have noticed working with my corporate clients is that creative thinking seems to be more in high demand. In addition to, for the managers I work with, mentoring and coaching skills. So sort of the concept in traditional management, which is sort of command and control. I have the answers, my expertise. It's why I'm paid what I'm paid. I'm here to tell you what to do and how to do it. However, that trend has certainly been moving in the other direction, where managers are now more trying to empower their teams to think more for themselves. And organizations are looking for people less with definitive answers and with more of a keen sense of curiosity and where opportunities might lie. And that really depends on your ability to be curious and ask good questions. So I guess one could say that maybe now and this time is probably more critical to have that skill set than maybe in the past, where having a specific set of knowledge was good enough to come into an organization and apply that knowledge across to the daily tasks. But considering that so many employees and managers, middle managers, upper managers, and executives have to really be nimble to be able to respond to things that are happening instantaneously within a marketplace, within their own companies, they can't really rely necessarily on a fixed set of information, intelligence, or data. So where that goes is opens up the idea that, well, we need more people who can think creatively, who can ask better questions, and who are able to empower teams to be able to figure out how to solve problems on their own. So I guess one could surmise that maybe now it is more called upon to have that skill set.
Yeah, definitely universal. Jen and I, as coaches, I would echo exactly what you said in terms of how organizations are changing and from that command and control, which has been a long shift, but definitely trying that creative thinking is very important and that empowerment piece.
Well, the critical thinking, right? Yeah. The problem solving is where I see a lot of interest as well, that it's how do we function better because as you said, the heroic leadership model isn't necessarily the model anymore. More leadership teams are working together, and that this ability to get to each other's thinking and to frame a problem. The art of the question is all critical thinking is based in questioning, right? And so it's I think a fantastic skill set. So I was curious, when you do all the organizational work that you do, and you've got Sandy and I were amazed at how much information you packed into this book. We're like, oh my God, there's so much here.
There's a lot.
There is a lot. It's really kind of a master's course in some ways. What are the things that leaders, what's the most common thing? What's the thing that always comes up for you when you're in that work, that the most useful tool, the handiest thing? And you've got this great framework in this 4-phase model in here, and I love the model. We're going to talk about that in a second. So I'm just curious, of all of it, where do you find most of your work in all the collection of content.
Wow. Well, it really spans across a lot of the topics within the book, but it kind of starts with knowing thyself, which is chapter 3, which follows chapter 1, which is curiosity. So the curiosity and knowing thyself, which is really a lot about emotional intelligence and metacognition. So metacognition is sort of just that skill set to be able to be aware of how you learn and how you perceive the world around you, how you navigate the problems around you. The higher your metacognitive skill set, the more you're able to handle uncertainty and difficulties. And with that, I find is probably one of the most critical skill sets for leaders that I've worked with. It's that self-awareness of knowing how one functions, what works for one person, how they go about, again, dealing with problems, dealing with other people's situations. So it starts with the self and this sense of calmness and confidence. So I think as you raise your metacognitive skill set in knowing thyself, I think what happens is that a certain confidence comes upon you, which gives you the ability to, I guess, allow others to rise and shine, and for you to be able to ask better questions as opposed to be in a defensive mode of having to continually prove yourself. So I think that metacognitive skill set kind of slowly diminishes that sense of you need to constantly prove yourself and you need to constantly, be the loudest in the room and have all the answers and all of those things, which I guess are part of the more traditional, as you call that, sort of heroic leadership model. So it's knowing thyself, coming to a point where your self-awareness is such where you could actually create detachment between your own emotions and your own thoughts. Within the section, I say it's important to recognize that within each of us, there are 3 selves. There is a thinking self, there is a feeling self, and there is a noticing self. And that noticing self is the observing self, which gives the ability to separate yourself from what's tangling up a situation and giving you that objectivity to be able to stand back, watch how you're reacting to a situation, and how you're handling a situation without getting completely entwined with the problem. So I think it all starts there, and the best leaders I've worked with had that skill set. I don't know if it was a natural thing or if it was something that came out of just lots of experience or just intelligence, but I've known the more successful leaders that I've known had that higher metacognitive skill set and that ability to have that confidence to be able to empower others and not necessarily have to be the one who feels that they have to constantly prove themselves, and allowing others to rise up. So I think it starts there. And then it goes into the frameworks of actually how do you go about asking questions? How do you go about solving problems through questioning methodologies? But what precedes all of that is the sense of curiosity, openness, sort of part of that sort of 5 big sort of personality trait thing, which then gives you the ability to enhance your metacognitive skills, which then will then give you the ability to then work through the rest of the methodologies, frameworks, and techniques, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, it makes total sense. And as you're talking about metacognition and that ability to know how you learn, right? Understand how you learn, it speaks to me in just this whole idea of learning agility and this whole ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? Is really a better indicator of what good leadership looks like, right? It's less on I have all this experience to bear, but it's how fast can I learn, unlearn, and relearn and apply that learning, right, in a meaningful way that really puts people in a position of power, which speaks directly to this idea of your metacognition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it's nice because, as you say, like some people, maybe they're born with it, but not everybody is. So in the book, you actually give some tips of how people can enhance it. So that whole practice of self-reflection, self-questioning, asking yourself probing questions, like we're always trying to question others, but questioning ourselves, measurement, journaling, which we're big fans of, collaborative learning, seeking feedback. And so there's ways and tips and tricks that leaders can, try and just to try to enhance it for themselves, because it can be a learned for some and innate for others.
Right. And even those who I found were more naturally inclined to have those skills, once they understood sort of the meaning of a lot of that skill, they then were more open to learning more about how to enhance it. So they may have had a natural ability to have some of that, but once their minds become open to, okay, what is this about? They become exponentially more effective as they increase that skill set. So one does work well with the other, but in either case, even if you don't have a natural tendency to have that skill set, it is something that can be learned. Maybe not so easily in some cases, but absolutely it's a skill set that can be learned. And the book does talk about methods by which you can help refine that skill set.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. So what I love is your three-phase model. So for listeners who are not familiar with this, walk us through this three-phase model, because it's a very great way to start to look at how you get to this questioning framework.
Right. Well, the three-phase model actually was something that came up many, 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 many years ago when I was training sales teams on how to work through questioning with a prospective client or prospective customer, and how to handle objections. And so I sort of drew this model on, okay, let's see if we can come up with a framework that has some consistency and maybe some predictability. And after a while and refining it back and forth, it started to kind of come together, and more of my team started to bring that into their toolkit on how to work with customers, especially those who may be throwing up objections that they may not be able to answer right away. But then, as I got more into managing and leading and training others in various departments, I started to modify the model into marketing and customer service and general communication and leadership. And it really starts with this concept of silent observation, where the first phase would be, okay, first you observe. Now, within that, there's various ways that breaks down, but essentially it's about listening, which is probably the most important skill in communication, is that ability to listen well and listen carefully. And in that process, as you listen and as you question to observe, you are taking it all in. You're not reacting, and you're not necessarily surmising or concluding anything. So after your first phase, this is a very sort of simplistic way to describe this, you then move into the second phase, which is the challenge phase. And this is a set of various questioning methods where you start to question some of the things that were brought up in the observation stage. But your questioning is such where you're doing it in a way that you're looking for clarification, and you're asking, well, could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be a result of this? Is it possible that maybe you're looking at it in this way as opposed to this way? And what this does, and by the way, the first stage is really important to establish rapport and trust, because if you're attempting to use the model and you come in there and you sort of skip right to the challenge phase or the inference phase, you're not going to establish that rapport and that trust with that person, because that person needs to be heard. They want to be heard. And it's your job to let them do their thing and speak their mind, so to speak. So once you do that, then they feel, okay, they seem to have heard what I've said. Now, this could be a complaint coming from a direct report. It could be a potential customer. It could be an actual customer. It could be a leader speaking to a team, whatever the case might be. In the challenge phase, you then start to challenge the various points that were brought up in stage 2. Could it be? Is it possible that it's a perspective and point of view process? And then in the third stage, and by the way, there's also 5-stage models to this too, but the more simple one is the 3-stage, is inference. So at this point, then together, and it's important to use questioning to make sure that you're still on the same page with whoever it is that you're speaking with. So to make sure you're asking questions to make sure that, are we in agreement here? Does this make sense? Did I interpret what you had said earlier properly? Is there anything I might be missing here? Et cetera, et cetera. Your inference stage is essentially when you're now both walking into the final stage of this model, where you're now presenting, or you're asking them to present some conclusions or ways forward. So this would be, okay, say you're a manager and you're working with a direct report who comes to you, and maybe they have a complaint about a situation within their department or within a colleague, or et cetera. So it's important to go through this model, and then by the third stage, you're all together. Then it's a matter of discovering and exploring ways in which to figure out how to solve this problem. But again, the key is for you not to solve the problem, but for you to empower the other person to help them solve their own problem. If in fact, even if it's in a sales situation, you use questioning in order for the other person to kind of unravel what it is that's in their way. And maybe by that point, it's clear what's in their way because you've already gone through stage 2. And then you finally together, and again, this is sort of good leadership and good questioning, is throwing that back at them and asking them probing questions to figure out, okay, how do you suggest we resolve this situation? What do you think is the best step forward? How would you recommend the next steps? What would they look like? So you go through various methods of having them visualize how you might go forward. And then at that point, you then ask questions to finalize what that next step might be. Now, you may not be coming to some grand conclusion to solve this huge problem, but the important thing is that you walk through these steps in order to get to a point of agreement where you're empowering the other person to feel as if they're in a position to be able to express themselves or be able to come up with an idea that's going to solve the problem that they might be facing. Now, again, this all depends on what your role is, who you are, what the situation is. But that's sort of a roundabout explanation of what that 3-phase model is, if that makes sense.
Yes.
A couple of things in there. Filtering the person, not the problem, for sure.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
Huge.
In your discover phase, you talk about listening. And in your book, you say, listening is hard. Takes a lot of energy and patience, sort of like the kung fu, to listen closely and objectively.
Yes.
Why
There's
is
so many
listening
kinds
so
of listening.
hard?
So many kinds of listening. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Right. Well, as I had said before, listening I consider to be the most critical skill in any effective communication process. And there is lots of different ways to listen. So one could say, I'm listening, but maybe they're not really listening. Maybe they're listening defensively. Maybe they're listening selectively. Maybe they're listening passively. And I bring some examples of what that looks like. Now, listen, we all engage in all of these different types of listenings automatically, but we don't necessarily define the type of listening that we happen to be doing. Now, many years ago, I started to do this to ask myself, sort of going back to that know thyself, ask yourself questions internally. How am I listening to this particular person or to this scenario? Now, if I recognize that I'm half listening and that's okay, well, okay, that's fine. But a lot of times you'll discover that the way in which you're listening may not be aligned with what might be called for in the conversation. So we all bring a certain amount of baggage, especially if it's an emotional laden conversation with a colleague or a loved one, where there just might be a lot of stuff going on in the background. So we tend to approach those situations with a defensive posture, which then blocks us off from being able to truly contribute and listen to the other person. So I list probably, 8 or 10 different types of ways to listen. And I even say in the book, listen, a lot of this is automatic, but that's not the point of me listing the different types of listening styles. It's really being conscious of how you can listen and the different types of listening: empathetic listening, observational listening, critical listening. These are all things that we do automatically, but we may not necessarily know exactly that that's the mode in which we happen to be in. But the more conscious you are of that, then I think the more focused you'll be able to be in sort of using the right listening mode for whatever conversation you happen to be in.
Being aware of how you listen. And when you're in is the different kinds of listening, is it fluid within the context of a conversation? Do you move to one to another based on the dynamic? Or do you find it's contextual, that sometimes certain situations, certain meetings, or certain people will put you in a place of listening a certain way?
Yeah. Well, it's all context, really. And you can shift your different types of listening modes within one particular situation. But the more conscious you are of how it is that you are listening, the more you'll be able to tune the mode in which would be most appropriate. Now, sometimes, a passive listening situation is just fine until you ask yourself, is this the appropriate method by which to engage in this conversation? And then all of a sudden you say, I'm not really giving this my proper attention. And the other person is probably receiving that as well. So they're not opening up as much as probably they could. So then I would then switch at that point to then make sure that my focus is appropriate for the moment. So it's both fluid, where you're asking yourself these questions a little bit as you might be in a conversation, and yet it's also contextual as to, okay, what does this situation call for right now, and do I need to change the mode by which I'm listening? So that's all, again, kind of a little back to the metacognitive thing as well, just sort of knowing thyself, knowing how to come away from yourself, be able to look back at yourself and say, how am I handling this situation? How am I listening? Is my listening mode affecting the way in which this other person is communicating with me? And a lot of times these things are subconscious and unconscious for those who have low metacognitive awareness, where they may not be fully aware of how their listening is actually impacting negatively the other person's ability to communicate. So this is
would
often
impact your questioning, wouldn't it?
It would.
It sure would.
So we all need to raise ourselves to a conscious competence around inquiring and listening in that discovery phase, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we move into the challenge phase, you have the Socratic 8. Tell us about that.
Right. The Socratic 8 comes out of Socrates' concepts that there are essentially 4 directions of thought. I'm not sure if I can recall them right now, but you've got origin of thought, you've got point of view, you've got consequence of thought, and then you've got evidence, I think. So these 4 pillars, he felt, were the key to any inquiry. So if you're about to go about trying to solve a problem, or understand a situation, through questioning, you want to take a look at these 4 pillars. So from those 4 pillars, I sort of created questions, but also based on other people's work in this area. Nobody called it the Socratic 8. Some put 6 in, some put 5, some leave it at 4. I felt the 8 was a pretty good number, and it covered all the bases. So what it essentially does is that it's all about critical thinking and about good questioning. So some of the examples I use in the book have to do with someone comes to you with a crazy conspiracy theory, and you want to be appropriately skeptical and judicious in how you analyze the veracity of that claim. So through the Socratic 8, you work through each one, starting with, okay, is this the right question to ask? First of all, which is a favorite of mine when I manage teams, and certainly in my consulting, I would often ask, is this the right question to ask? Are we barking at the wrong question? And that goes back to, what is the origin of this problem and what is the objective that we're trying to achieve? From that, you move into sort of the evidentiary stage of, what evidence do we have to support this idea? And then through questioning, you could ask things of perspective and point of view. And that would be, well, how would somebody who's opposed to this idea, what would they argue? Is there another way to perceive this situation? So perception. Okay, the data that you're looking at, is it correct? And maybe more importantly, is it being interpreted properly? So you have data that could be fact, but you also have a human that interprets that data. So it's important to kind of make sure you're covering that base, that, okay, well, the data apparently is well sourced, but are we looking at it in the right way based on the problem that we're looking at? And then so you work through these 8 points until you eventually get to a point where you say, okay, if we go ahead and proceed with this idea and we assume that this is the right solution to this problem, what are the consequences of acting on this idea? And that's a critical point. And Socrates talks a bit about this, about looking at the consequence of decisions and the consequence of thinking, because it's one thing to sort of go through a thought experiment about how something might play out, and this is the right idea, but it's another to really play it completely out, to say, well, who wins and who loses if that turns out to be sort of the binary effect of a decision. So through those 8, obviously I didn't cover them all, but you kind of walk through this very logical, methodical process by you asking questions, by taking points of view, by looking at data, by looking at origin, by looking at source, by looking at, what is really the objective here. And then finally, okay, if we do this, what are the consequences? And are those consequences worth the risk, if in fact there's a risk involved? So that's sort of a roundabout way to describe the Socratic 8.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
And are you finding that your clients are taking the time to go through this methodology?
Well, certainly in the workshops, we spend a fair amount of time doing various role playing to work through those. And in follow-ups, I certainly try to reinforce the learnings. But who knows how sticky it is, and how they, the various participants who have moved through my workshops, how they apply that down the line. Now, the feedback I've gotten over the years, has been pretty consistent, that it does seem to stick. But who knows down the road if they're able to. And you don't have to carry out all 8. I think it's important just to know that the framework is there to pick and choose. At least you're going through that process in a methodical way that gives you at least some structure to how to analyze and tackle a problem in a critical thinking mode.
Yeah, a little structure, a little rigor, which is good, because I think a lot of the leaders and teams struggle with, right, some of that rigor, where we go into our biases and we go into things like, satisficing. We just sort of find the pattern and go, oh, I see the thing. And we don't really spend the time forming it up in that kind of way.
Right. I mean, I even found like in some of my networking workshops where I work with teams, and I work with a lot of science teams, and very smart people with just incredible skills on the technical side, but maybe a little less strong in the communication end. And there's a networking workshop that I do where a lot of them attend, and they're often perplexed. How do you start a conversation? When you're working a room, we're often told to go to these, conferences, and the first thing, how do I structure a conversation? Cold. So I draw a pyramid. And I walk through very simply a very simple model of the 3-phase or the 5-phase. And then I give them the basic framework, and then I give them a little bit of the Socratic 8. Before you know it, a light goes off and says, oh, I never thought that there's actually a framework that I could use to actually start a conversation and engage with somebody in a way that will hopefully turn into a meaningful conversation. So I found that to be a surprising sort of result of some of the folks who may be a little less or a little more intimidated by these ideas, and certainly the idea of having a conversation with a complete stranger.
All those introverted C's and S's that are out there, Jen.
Oh, it's true. And it's funny because as you were just talking, Sean, I too have an Irish Catholic background, which you talk about in your book.
Right.
And I was like, I wonder if he had to diagram sentences the way we had to diagram sentences. Because you start to really think about language in a functional format, right? Where I don't know that kids anymore really have the understanding of prepositions and adverbs the way that we had to have rigor around that, and how language is so important. And so when you structure a question, why you structure it the way you do, and why is an affronting kind of way to start the question versus how versus all of those things. Yes. There is just such a bevy of information in your book.
Thank you.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. So we could probably talk about this a lot longer because there's really just a lot of meat in here. But tell people who are downloading and listening to the podcast where to find your book and how to get in touch with you if they want more understanding, how to get better at this questioning thing, because literally a skill for everybody who runs a team, runs a group. I mean, obviously we focus on the leadership end, but
as a family,
this is interpersonal, right? This is an interpersonal skill. So it works on all the people in your life, and helps you get clarity, get all the things that relationships need to move forward. So how do they find your book? How do they find you?
Yeah, so the book is now available through Amazon at this point. So The Art of the Question. There is another book out there that came out many years ago called The Art of the Question. So this is obviously not that one. This is The Art of the Question, a guide for seekers, dreamers, problem solvers, and leaders. And you could learn more about me and my services at peakluma.com, peakluma.com. So that's the way to reach me.
And where are we going to find you playing your instruments next? Talk a little. I'm not letting you off the hook on the arts conversation. How does that play into your whole life, and what do you do with it? Do you actually play in public? And
I do. I actually had put a record out, last record, a couple of years ago, if we still call them that, and Latin jazz is what I'd put out, called Wonderland. And I've been doing, I'm not playing out as much right now, but when I do, I'll typically gig mostly the Northeast, from Washington to New York and Boston. I'm based here in Philadelphia. So I'll typically play jazz clubs and some jazz festivals and things. But right now, especially since I embarked upon the whole literary thing, I've tucked back and done more studio work. So I'm more in the studio these days and not necessarily on a stage. So I do commercial work and commercial production work on the music side as well. As far as performance, right now, the calendar is a little light, but that may very well change in the coming months, depending on how I'm feeling.
Well, Jen and I like to travel and see the arts of different towns. So maybe we'll look to see where you're going to play when your dance card gets a little more full.
I sure will. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, sweet.
Terrific.
Thanks so much, Sean, for your time. And everybody go get yourself a copy of the book and get better at the questions, because everybody needs to do it.
Yes.
And I have a final question for you two.
Yeah.
Kung Fu, OT Kung Fu. Where did that name come from?
Drinking.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. The idea of
alcohol. That's what.
The practice, right? So
the discipline.
The practice and discipline that it really takes organizations to sustain a change, to actually become better leaders and become better teams is not the kind of stuff you read an article and things just change for you. Most things are a practice, right? So I have a whole book on accountability, which looks at it as a practice. And so Kung Fu just kind of fit into our whole brainwave around how we see transformational change and development. Yeah.
Excellent.
Kind of to your point about, you're teaching this and we're not sure how much is taking root. It is in parts, but it's that discipline of people learning it and applying it and learning it and applying it and
And part of the rigor, like, so when you put into a practice, the art of questioning, I'm trying to get everybody at the end of to get learning rituals based on questioning, right? That if we're going to get better at how we show up together, where's the 5 minutes at the end of our meetings to say, how's this going? What could we be doing differently, right? Just that moment of metacognition as a team. Let's look at how we're doing, how are we showing up together, and how could we do this better? And asking the questions out loud can transform how you perform together meeting to meeting. And it takes 5 minutes.
I love it.
That's all right.
So thanks for your time. For our podcast listeners, leave your comments. Let us know what else you want to hear about. We're happy to podcast about anything to do with leadership. So send us your questions, download our podcast, and we look forward to our next one.
See you on the next one.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Very good. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And visit Jen's website at own-up.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.